welcome to another brand new episode of Dingers and Stingers, the podcast that knows that when it comes to adding free agents to improve your team, it's better late than never. We'll talk about the Red Sox and Alex Bregman in just a minute, as today is the continuation of our MLB Division Preview Series. Later in the show, we'll also talk about the NFL honors. We'll do a little backfill on content there, talk about our thoughts on some awards. A couple of, our guys won some awards, so we're going to talk about them specifically as well. And then to round out the show, we will also be debuting our new weekly segment, Dingers and Stingers, where we give one positive thing from the world of sports for the week and one thing that maybe we didn't like as much from the week in sports. So we'll get to all that. But first, as I mentioned up top, we are going to do our MLB division previews. First, though, I'm Dallas. That's Drew. And that's Matt. This is our show, and we're doing it. How we doing, fellas?
Day by day.
Day by day is exactly it. We're chugging along here, but it's all good things.
Nice. Wonderful. Well, let's get right into it. I know we're going to have a lot to talk about with the AL East today. That is our division that we're going to be discussing. Last week's episode, we talked about the NL East, so if you'd like our thoughts on that, check that episode out. You can always go back and check out that stuff. But today, we are going to its AL counterpart, the AL East. This was a fascinating division last year. Lots of ups and downs for all the teams involved. And this year, I don't think will be any different. So I'm going to dive right in. Just like last week, we'll talk about where we've been with this division. So the 2024 final standings for this division were as follows. The Yankees finished in first place with 94 wins. They were, of course, the AL champions and lost the World Series to the Dodgers. They were followed in second place closely by the Orioles, who won 91 games, and they were sort of unceremoniously booted from the playoffs in the wild card round against the upstart Kansas City Royals. Following them, the Red Sox in third place at an even 81 wins, 81 losses, 500 exactly, bouncing up and down, back and forth between 500, slightly above, slightly below all year, ending right in the middle. Then the Tampa Bay Rays at 80 wins in fourth place, and then down at the bottom, the Blue Jays with 74 wins, and they round out the division there. So that's how they finished last year. We're going to talk about where we're going, how the off seasons have looked, and we're going to start with the first place New York Yankees. So setting those Yankees up, the big thing this year, we talked about it last week with the Mets, but that was a big headline, and they got him. But who lost him? That would be the Yankees, of course. They lost Juan Soto, and so they needed to turn to their plan B. And turn to their plan B they did. They made several moves to help satisfy their fan base, keep them at bay. And so let's talk about some of those moves and where we see those moves bringing the Yankees for this year.
Yeah, so you nailed it. I mean, losing Juan Soto is going to be the headline of the offseason for the Yankees, but they were one of the busiest teams. They were, second. They were the runner-up for Juan Soto, so they put a lot of work in there. They signed Max Fried. They traded for Devin Williams. They signed Paul Goldschmidt. They traded for Cody Bellinger. They did a lot, and some people were saying, well, I think this is a better team, actually, despite not having Juan Soto. I think the Yankees were able to, distribute that money, spread it out more, and make what would have been a better team than had they just brought back Juan Soto and not been able to afford to do these other things. I don't necessarily agree with that take. I think they could be better. They could be worse. I don't think it's obvious one way or another. Their pitching got better. I think that is without a doubt, no question. And I think a lot of the moves they made, they could have done even with getting Juan Soto. Maybe not signing Max Fried because he got quite a big contract, but like the trades and the other minor signings, I think they probably could have made it work. But yeah, the pitching got better. You ship out Nestor Cortez, and you get Devin Williams in return, who's arguably the best closer in baseball. You add Max Fried, who has been one of the most steady, reliable starting pitchers in baseball for the last 5 years. You add him to a rotation that already had Garrett Cole It already had Carlos Rodon. It had Rookie of the Year Luis Heel. Um, but I think the offense is just going to be a lot worse because, yeah, you only lost Juan Soto, but that's one of the three best hitters in baseball. Granted, they have maybe the best hitter in all baseball still with Aaron Judge. Um, but I think it's being a little bit underrated that they also lost Gleyber Torres, who, uh, similar to Juan Soto, very bad defensively, but he, for their stretch in the playoffs, he was their leadoff hitter. He was the guy setting the table for Juan Soto and Aaron Judge coming up after him. Uh, and I like Paul Goldschmidt. I like Cody Bellinger, but they're just the combination of those two guys isn't as good as Juan Soto by himself, let alone Juan Soto and Gleyber Torres.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see where you're coming from. As you know, I've been a little bit not against like the whole Juan Soto investment, but I definitely think, investing into all parts of the team is more important than spending it all on a singular player who can only do one part of his job. And as you said, I mean, Juan Soto is one of the best hitters in the sport. Not trying to, discount that. But I look at what they got, and to the exact opposite point, I mean, they have, uh, was it Jason? What's their Dominguez? Is that
Dominguez, yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
Jason Dominguez is coming up. I know he had issues last year, but he's been a top prospect for I don't know how many years. And it's like you've got him coming, you've got Cody Bellinger coming. They're gonna be able to field like a really solid outfield. They're gonna be able to put Aaron Judge back in right field where I think he's a lot better. Um, I can see that kind of cohesiveness kind of bringing the team back together. And yeah, they lose out on a big hitter at the top of the lineup, but we've seen Cody Bellinger have incredible years. And even on the Cubs, I mean, he had some really good stretches. And Paul Goldschmidt is a couple years removed from being a very, very prominent hitter. Um, I don't know. I personally, I actually don't dislike the moves they made. I don't know if it results in success necessarily right away, but I definitely do. I like the way that they've kind of built the team post Juan Soto.
Yeah, I think once they lost Juan Soto, the you know if you're a Yankees fan and you want to call this offseason either a success or a failure, I think at the beginning of the offseason a lot of that hinged on Juan Soto, and losing him to the Mets is like a little bit extra sour because that just didn't happen before.
Yeah.
Um, However, I think a lot of Yankees fans are rightfully optimistic about this year and optimistic about the moves they made. I think they got better defensively, and like I already said, they got better on the pitching side of things. That bullpen is arguably now going to be the best in baseball because yeah, you lost Clay Holmes, who had his ups and downs with the closer role and all that, but Devin Williams, like I said, he's one of the
Mm,
best closers in baseball. You add him to Luke Weaver, who got converted to a reliever and was just dominant for them.
mm,
And I see no reason why he can't repeat some of that success. They also made an underrated trade. It's kind of under the radar because they traded Jose Trevino, their backup catcher, and they got this relief pitcher Fernando Cruz from the Reds. And I'll be honest, I had no idea who that was when they made that trade, but from what I've seen, like he just has crazy stuff, and like a really nasty splitter and all that. I think that, if they're in the lead going down to the thumbs up Dallas, uh, going down to the seventh, eighth, ninth inning, they feel really good about that. That being said, I just think the offense is going to score less runs. Not only you lose Juan Soto, you add some guy like Cody Bellinger is a helpful player.
mm.
He's just not gonna come close to the output that Juan Soto gives you. And Paul Goldschmidt, I think he has a little bit left in the tank, but he hasn't been quite the same guy. He's gonna be 37. Like there are reasons for concern with the lineup, and Stanton's already hurt. They don't really have a backup catcher. If guys start getting injured. There's not huge batch of like replacements coming in, like some other teams have. But that's just me being, maybe a little pessimistic. They also didn't sign a third baseman, which I kind of thought they should have. Which, there's going to be a theme in this division of really good teams who just don't feel quite complete. If I had one big complaint about the Yankees, it's that they didn't sign a third baseman, so they're going to go in with either Oswaldo Cabrera or DJ LeMahieu getting those at bats. Like I just don't love it. Um, but yeah, they should still. It's a weak American League. They should still be one of the top teams. Even if they score less runs, they should be giving up a lot less runs.
Mhm.
Um, I fully expect the Yankees to be right back in the thick of things, even if they're not as, at the beginning of last year and then even in the playoffs, they seem dominant at times. I don't know if we'll see that Yankees team, but they should definitely expect a winning season.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, I
I
think
agree.
you know that.
I agree, absolutely. Yeah, so that was the thing with the Yankees, right? Like they replaced, some of these players. They Anthony Rizzo for Paul Goldschmidt. You have, Cody Bellinger now in the outfield where there was Juan Soto before. So you know, are they good enough? Are they necessarily replacement level for those players they left? That's the question, right? And so rounding out the Yankees here, we wanted to do each of you has an X factor for the Yankees this year. Who or what is going to be the thing the Yankees rely on if they're going to be able to have any success this year?
The X factor I wrote down is pretty simple for the Yankees. I think it's just someone other than Judge needs to be a hitter. Um,
Yeah.
right? They lose Juan Soto, and to his credit, he was basically the offense outside of Aaron Judge. Aaron Judge can hit 60 home runs in a season, but if there's no one getting on base ahead of him, it's kind of for nothing. And not nothing, but you know what I'm saying. It's just the impact is so um, the value of the impact is just brought down when you don't have people surrounding your best hitters. And so they need someone. I mean, they need two someones, maybe three someones, but they need someone to start hitting and being not even incredible, but just consistent. They're so streaky on offense, and they can't score 11 runs in a game and then the next three score one. Like they gotta get consistency. That's the X factor I have.
Mine is right in line with that. I zeroed in a little more specific. I went with Anthony Volpe. And the reason I chose him is because I think a lot of guys in this lineup, we kind of know who they are, for the most part. I think Jazz Chisholm stays on the field. He's a great hitter. Obviously, Aaron Judge is a monster. I think, and Bellinger, Goldschmidt, we've already talked about them. Uh, Anthony Volpe was a top prospect just a few years ago. He's come up. He's played great defensive shortstop. He had a few big moments in the playoffs. If he could put together a like a really good offensive season to add to that, he he becomes this franchise shortstop that they thought he would be. Um, and that would just like if he could settle and be a great hitter, or just a good on base guy or whatever, and he can take that leadoff spot, so Judge has someone getting on in front of him, like you said, Matt. Like I think that would go a really long way if he has the same season he's had the last couple of years, where he's still a useful player, he still has value, from his defense and all that, but like. If he could just take that next step and be what they expected him to be, I think the Yankees can go a lot further.
Yeah, 100%. Well, let's keep an eye on those guys and those things for this team. Yeah, you guys were right in line with each other. So let's see over the course of the year if any Yankees can step up. Literally step up to the plate and take a swing. So moving past the Yankees, we'll go to the Orioles now. So the Orioles this offseason, there were some expectations for the Orioles this offseason about what they should do, what kind of the fans were expecting them to do. Their last offseason, they retained some key veterans and, signed a couple of, players to their squad to improve. But so you think the idea would be the same for this year, do the same and keep adding. How did that go?
Well, the Orioles, they're one of the most frustrating teams because they have this young core that teams drool over. This young, cost-effective, controllable core. They had all these, they were very bad for a lot of years. They had high draft picks, and a lot of these guys have hit. Adley Rushman came up. He got second place in Rookie of the Year. The next year, Gunnar Henderson comes up. He wins Rookie of the Year. The next year, this past year, Colton Cowser gets second place Rookie of the Year. You have Jackson Holiday, who did not perform great last year, but he's still very young. They expect big things from him. They have Jordan Westberg. They have Heston Kjerstad, I think is how you say his name. They have all these prospect hitters, right, that they're counting on. And last year, they supplemented that by making a huge trade and getting Corbin Burns. And I don't necessarily fault them for not keeping Corbin Burns around just because it seems like his goal was to play close to home and his home is Arizona. And, maybe it wasn't exactly the wide open free agency that we thought it was. But to add Charlie Morton, who's 41 years old, and then this Sugano guy from Japan who's like 35 years old, and that's your big pitching additions. If I'm a fan, I'm sick to my stomach because you just need some pitching. But at the same time, besides Gunnar Henderson, who had an amazing year last year, Adley really fell off. I'm not saying he's cooked or anything, but it was not a pretty year. There are reasons to be concerned. You lose Anthony Santander as well, and he hit 44 home runs last year. They replace him with Tyler O'Neill, who he was on my Red Sox. He was a pretty good hitter, but I feel like people are overrating the year he had because he strikes out a ton. He hit 30-something home runs, which is great, but he only had 60-something RBIs, so hardly anyone was ever on base for his home runs. And he's a walking injury concern. So they got new ownership. The expectation was, okay, maybe this new ownership will spend like the previous regime didn't. So far, that hasn't happened. There's been reports that maybe that's the front office's fault. I don't know whose fault it is. It just doesn't seem like good business. And not to mention, none of these young guys have been extended yet either. So really no money has been spent on this team. That being said, there are a lot of pieces to like here. They've made the playoffs the last couple of years. They haven't won a game yet, but I don't know. There's reasons to be optimistic, and there's reasons to just be very frustrated.
Yeah, I mean, taking more of an optimistic approach to it, I do think, because there was rumors all through the offseason that they were looking into trades for other pitchers, right? It's not like they were just like Corbin Burns walking, oh, well, we'll be fine. It was like they were actively seeking out trades for Dylan Cease, for example. I
Which
feel
could
like
still
for
happen.
sure. Yeah, which absolutely could still happen. And it's I think absolutely we could see them be aggressive through this first part of the season and towards the trade deadline. Um, but yeah, this team is pretty cut and dry. They're relying on their young core. Um, that's pretty much all there is to it, right? It's they have been the dream farm system for the past few years, and they've had some success, but also, you get a little nervous. You have the number one prospect in baseball last year, and he comes up and looks really out of place. Um, and so it's going to be interesting to see, can their prospects transition from just being hype trains to actually contributing members of the team? Because you can have all the hype you want, but if you're not actually adding to the team when you get up to the big leagues, there's no room for you.
Yeah, I love this young core for the Orioles.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys see that picture of them at Disneyland or wherever they were the other day? There was a picture of the team. I guess they went to Disneyland, some of them. You forget, in the off season, I tend to forget how all these guys are
Look
basically just
identical.
two years older versions of each other,
Little
But
white
when they were all
blonde
together,
boys.
in that photo, I was like, man, they all look just alike, man. It's
They
crazy.
look like a sweet little Mormon family just getting pushed through a conveyor belt.
Yeah, they look like they were, talk about homegrown. They look like they were grown from the ground to from each other's like locks of hair from one grew the other
Yeah.
one. So yeah, they're going to be a lot of fun to watch. I always like watching the Orioles. But yeah, I agree. Like I was looking for them to add more pitching this year, and I don't think, so far that hasn't worked out. We'll keep an eye on them as the year goes on, of course. So the Orioles. Let's talk X factor for the Orioles. What is going to help this Orioles team remain competitive?
Do you want to take it first?
Yeah, sure. My X factor that I chose is Grayson Rodriguez, who is their only like recent prospect who was a pitcher, basically. Everyone else was a position player. He uh, has shown flashes of being really, really good. He has nasty stuff. He can throw very hard. He's big, tall, lanky. Um, it seems like they're relying on him a lot because you got Zach Eflin. He's solid, not really an ace. Charlie Morton. He's dependable, but he's not an ace. This Sugano guy, you're not counting on him to be an ace. And then Dean Kramer, who is just in no world is he an ace. So then who's it going to be? Who's going to step up? Uh, it's between Eflin and Grayson Rodriguez, but I think they're counting on Grayson Rodriguez. I think the plan was for him to be a dominant starting pitcher, and I think they're hoping he takes a big step this year and that their gamble on not getting a true established ace will pay off. And if he can pitch like an ace, then this should be one of the best teams in the American League. If he doesn't and no one really does, then they could be in a lot of trouble very quickly. And the Corbin Burns trade last year was late. I don't know if it was, I can't remember if it was already into spring training or not. There could be more moves, like Matt pointed out. Dylan Cease trade rumors have been around. They seem like they could match up well with the Padres. Um, there's always been Mariners pitchers in rumors,
Yep.
Pirates pitchers in rumors. Like there are trades that could happen, whatever. But as constructed right now, I think they're counting a lot on Grayson Rodriguez. And so if he delivers, their season could look a lot different than if he doesn't.
Yeah, I had Grayson Rodriguez written down as my X factor as well. He's like the one prospect they have that's not a hitter. Um, I mean, he's been like their hyped pitching prospect for a good while now. I'll give a little shout out to this bullpen though. I think this bullpen is still able to win a lot of games for them.
Mm-hmm.
They have a young and flashy lineup. If they can just put up some runs and get through, just have inning eaters up at the top, like they can shut teams down. Just looking at this group, I mean, they had a kind of interesting year last year, but names who are pretty solid: Felix Bautista, Yennier Cano, or Cano, Sir Anthony Dominguez, Gregory Soto. Like it's good pitchers, guys who have had good
And
success here.
Bautista was hurt all last year, so
Yep.
they're
Hmm.
he's coming back, and he should I expect him to be a dominant closer again. So yeah,
Yeah, so
definitely I
it's like
like their bullpen.
if they can get through those first, five-ish innings and have a lead, like I think they still win a lot of like games with just the team they have. Like they look good, and I mean even their bench is pretty deep too. They've got good players. Yeah, I don't know. I think it'll be good. I had Grayson as my X factor though, so you kind of took it all right there.
Well, sometimes it just
Great minds.
it's pretty clear what a team needs for success.
Yep, certainly is, and I think I agree too. And so closing the book on the Orioles for today, just think about these young guys who, they made it to their postseason. They had a heartbreak. Kind of like that, right? You kind of like them
Hmm.
having that experience of like, oh, it's not going to all come easy to us, especially these guys who are top prospects. Pretty much their whole late high school, college careers. They know they're going to be in the MLB one day, right? It's time for stuff to not come easy to you. You kind of like that. And so this year, maybe they look to, there's a little bit of a chip on the shoulder, an edge that they have. We'll keep an eye out for that. But moving on, we're going to talk about now the Red Sox of Boston. This is a team we heard a lot from, or heard a lot about this offseason. One of maybe the more mentioned teams in the the Twitter sphere of like, you're on Twitter, you're on MLB trade rumors, you're scrolling and you see Boston Red Sox a lot. At the end of the day, how do they do this offseason? Where are we going with them? What do we think?
I think it's funny. It was about a week ago. It was exactly a week ago. I don't know the exact time when Alex Bregman to the Red Sox was announced. Before that, I would have called this offseason like maybe a C minus for the Red Sox.
Mhm.
Getting Alex Bregman shoots it up to probably an A minus, maybe even A if I'm feeling generous. Um, you trade for Garrett Crochet, who okay as a Red Sox fan, it's funny. I think a lot of teams was like, oh, if I'm a fan of this team, I'm going to be biased in their favor. I'm like the Red Sox fans are a little sick and they're kind of biased the other way. I like Garrett Crochet a lot. I'm expecting a lot from him. And I like the trade because I think the Red Sox gave up a fair price and not an outrageous price. But we've only seen him do it 1 year, and it wasn't a huge workload. He's young. He's got nasty stuff. I expect a lot from him. It seems like the national baseball world is much more hyped about that than like Red Sox world is. Um, but I like the move. He should be the ace. Alex Bregman, he's just a great player. He's a great leader. I'm happy he's on the team. Walker Bueller on a 1 year deal. Sure, like if you can find something in him, I don't think there's a phrase. There's no such thing as a bad 1 year contract. Yeah, I agree with that. The one area where they just didn't add enough, I think, is the bullpen. They got Aroldis Chapman, who has a lot of name recognition, but I don't know how much you can count on him uh, in the year 2025. They're counting on Liam Hendriks to come back from injury and put a lot of innings in, I imagine. So I don't love the state of the bullpen, but that being said, because the bar was so low, I think the Red Sox might have had the best offseason of any American League team because you add Garrett Crochet, you add Alex Bregman. That alone, I mean that's two all-star players adding to your roster. That's more than a lot of teams did. And you didn't really lose too much. You lost Kenley Jansen, who was your closer for the last couple of years. You lost Tyler O'Neill, who I already talked about with the Orioles. You lost Danny Jansen, didn't really do much for you after he was traded. So, like, there's a lot of reason to like this Red Sox team, but, not to, I didn't even mention these three prospects who are about ready to come to the major leagues. You kind of have, there's been like controversy at Red Sox camp about Rafael Devers and what position he plays, and we're not going to really talk too much about that, but um, to me, it's like, well, this is good. You have too many good players. It's like that's a good problem to have. We'll see how it all shakes out. There's always injuries and this and that, but yeah, I feel like the Red Sox. I'm not going to give them full credit because like none of these contracts are for like the longest is Bregman at 3 years, but that could just be one if he opts out. Garrett
Yeah.
Crochet, it's only 2 more years. Hopefully they extend him, but that hasn't happened yet. So like, I'm not going to give them too much credit for that because they didn't really spend for the future as much as for this year. But when it comes to this year, I think they should be a much better team.
Yeah, no, I completely agree there. I really liked the offseason. I think, you're saying Red Sox fans may sometimes be a little pessimistic about their moves. I'm just a regular fan. I'm pretty optimistic about some of these moves. I actually really like the Bueller pickup. I like the Crochet trade. Um, I really like the Bregman trade. I mean, really the only negative thing I've seen from Boston is the stuff about Devers and the position issue. Just about not being willing and whatnot. But like you said, we don't need to dive into that right now. I'm kind of looking through their roster. I'm curious. I know you guys have some good prospects coming up. Are any of them shortstops?
Yeah, yeah. Technically, kind of two of them are, but
Okay,
obviously only one of them will be.
because I was looking at this right now, like their projected 26, and I'm not saying a shortstop behind Trevor Story, and I was like, ooh, that's a tough place to go into a season with is a dude who cannot stay on the field to save his life at one of the premier positions.
Yeah.
I love Trevor Story, but yeah, interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think they're going to be really good personally. I really like this pitching staff. Their lineup is deep, deep, deep. Like looking just 1 through 9. There's not really a lull in this lineup where I'm like, yeah, this is a free 2 or 3 outs. It's like, no, you kind of got to pitch them 1 through 9. So I think they're going to be dangerous. You guys may have the oldest back end of a bullpen I've ever seen, but I like
And
both
that's
of them.
after losing Kenley Jansen. Yeah, I think yeah, to put on my optimist hat, I'm really like this is the most excited I've been about a Red Sox season since 2019, maybe, like in terms of just like where the expectations are, how the team looks, how the roster is shaking out. I mean, the name of the game this year is depth. And yeah, there's some high end potential on a lot of your starters and like starting pitchers and your starting lineup, but like last year, at the beginning of the year, like 3 of our pitchers went down, and we were just, it was guys who just should not have been soaking up major league innings were in that place. That is not going to be the case this year. We have um, 6 guys who are like potential for the rotation
Mm-hmm.
as it stands, and then you have 3 guys in Worcester that are, um, you know, they're not going to crack the rotation just in competition, but like if they have to start games for you because guys are hurt, you don't feel sick to your stomach about it. So that's Richard Fitz, that's Quinn Priester, and that's Cooper Criswell. Um, so it's like that alone makes you breathe a little easier. And then yeah, Trevor Story got hurt last year, and it was kind of scrambling to, you had Ceddanne Rafaela, who's like can play anywhere. He was playing a lot of shortstop. David Hamilton was playing a lot of shortstop, which he just shouldn't do at the major league level. This year, I imagine if Trevor Story gets hurt, they probably put Christian Campbell there. He's the readiest prospect of the bunch, it seems, and I think his natural position is shortstop. They're talking about him long term second base, maybe left field if if Devers stays at third. We'll see what happens. Like I said, it's just having a lot of good players is not a bad thing. But yeah, they're just better set up for when the catastrophes do happen. And if they don't happen, this team should roll. Because Trevor Story, I, I'm a big fan too. Like if he stays on the field for a full season, I would love to see where his numbers are at. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
he's done being a productive baseball player. Um, so yeah, that lineup was already one of the best scoring in baseball. You add Alex Bregman to it, you don't really lose anyone from it. Tyler O'Neill, but I just don't think that's that big of a loss. Yeah, I think they could be a very good team this year.
Yeah.
Yep, and one thing I will add too, joining this team eventually as well will be Patrick Sandoval. A good friend of
More pitching
mine.
depth.
Yep, good friend of mine. Love that guy. And look, I'll always remember his World Baseball Classic when he pitched for Mexico and he carved up USA and Japan. And someone is going to be able to unlock that. Some team is going to be able to bring that guy back for at least one more season. You have to think, right? And so why couldn't it be these Red Sox, and sometime in the next year or two, you never know. And so that could be interesting as well. But I didn't want to mention him because he's an old friend. So yeah, the Red Sox, you take into account if you think about, what all the things they could have had, all the names we heard they were in on, you could get in your head about that. But if you look at what they added, I think Drew's right. This is one of the best off seasons in the AL for sure, and maybe in the league too. I mean, the Dodgers had a good off season or whatever, but look, I think this is one of the most improved teams for sure. And so before we close the book on the Red Sox, let's go with X factors. What do you guys got?
You take it first, Matt.
Yeah, I think just based off of what I know about the team, like I said, they're kind of deep 1 through 9. I like this pitching staff. I have my X factor just being kind of the cohesion of the team. Um, I think, as with a lot of sports, if you get players who have maybe too big of an ego, it can kind of impact the team, especially when they play at premier positions or bat in premier spots. I'm going to be interested to see how it all kind of shakes out of just like, are they going to be cool with each other? Honestly, I don't think this team has a reason not to be really good. Just straight up. There's not a reason, barring bad health or something. Just this team should be good. And some people are going to have to make some potential sacrifices. I mean, you saw Yoshida come out and say he was like, I just want to be on the roster, man. Like he was like, I'll play anywhere. I don't care. DH, field, put me wherever. I just want to play. And like if they can get that team to buy in with that attitude, they have the guys to mix and match that they could be dangerous every game of the season. Um, and I really do believe that. So I think the X factor is going to, or maybe that's just called coaching. I don't know, but the culture, the locker room, the coaching, I think that's the X factor. The talent is already there.
Yeah, and I can say I'm not. I think that is very important, and I think that's going to come. I think Devers digging his feet in. Um, I think we'll just see how it shakes out. I'm not overly concerned about that as a long-term problem. It's more just kind of annoying. But I think this is a group and that they have good vibes. They had good vibes last year, even though they weren't that good of a team. And you add Alex Bregman, and it's kind of like it's the missing piece in the lineup, but I think he was the missing piece in the locker room too, where it's like, or the clubhouse. Um, Devers is the highest paid guy, but he's not really a leader. Like that's never been his MO. Trevor Story has tried to be a leader, but he hasn't been playing that much. And then it's a lot of young guys. And I think Alex Bregman, he's been to the playoffs every year of his career. 7 out of 8 years was in the ALCS at least. And he just he has that confidence and he has, like, if you saw his interview after all this stuff, you're like, oh, yeah, like a guy who like knows what's up and knows how to handle these kind of questions. So I feel good about that, but I think it is very important. My X factor, I went with the player. I went with Jaron Durant, who we haven't even mentioned yet, but he had
Mm-hmm.
an amazing year last year. He was like, I think he was like seventh place for MVP or something like that. He led the league in doubles and triples. He stole a bunch of bases. He played great defense in center field and left field. It was just a year that like we never really expected. And I think a lot of people are just mentally penciling him in for another year like that. And I don't know if that's fair because it was a crazy year. So like it's natural for him to regress. And if he does, what does that mean for the lineup? Because he's the leadoff hitter, he's like the engine that makes it go. If he really struggles, you know, there's got to be discussion about someone else taking that spot. Now, there's not enough depth that I'm not too worried about it, and I do expect him to be a solid player, but it's just I think a lot of people have overlooked the possibility that he could just be an average to good player next year instead of being one of the 10 best players in baseball or in the American League.
There's that pessimistic Boston fan. There he is.
Yeah, no doubt that'll be a huge part for the Boston Red Sox because you talk about, teams always look for players to take steps forward. Maybe you have a guy who's not quite ready, but no one really hopes that players who play well take a step back. That's not really ever hopefully factored in, and so it's a good point to make because when you play as well as Jarren Duran did, it's only natural to maybe expect that. So that's the Boston Red Sox. Moving on to the Rays of Tampa Bay, who continue to be one of the more brand consistent teams in the sport as far as offseason behavior is concerned. They sort of maybe underwhelmed maybe themselves last year. Maybe they didn't. But we expect the Rays in the playoffs. I think as a general thing, we are used to seeing them get that far. Didn't quite make it there last year. So what did their offseason look like? What do their prospects look like for this year?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. They're always one of the least spending teams in free agency, and that continued again this year. They signed Danny Jansen, they signed Hassan Kim, so two guys from our teams. And then they gave Eloy Jimenez a minor league deal, but it seems like maybe he'll make the major league team.
Yeah.
Uh, what I'm kind of surprised about is how not active they were on the trade market, because that is their MO. They are always swinging trades. They always keep guys around for a couple years. Their value picks up and they trade them. Um, but they didn't really do that. They traded Jeffrey Springs. They traded Jose Siri. Neither one is particularly necessary on this team, so it wasn't one of those out of left field trades. They kept Yandy Diaz. They kept Brandon Lau. Uh, you know, these are guys that have been on the Rays a lot longer than a lot of guys get to stay on the Rays. Um, and they didn't really have to do a ton because just by a new season starting and having a full offseason, they're getting a lot of pitchers back who missed a
Mm-hmm.
lot of time last year. And they do have one of the nastiest rotations in baseball when healthy. Shane McClanahan at the top. He missed all of last year. You have Tosh Bradley. You have Ryan Pepio, Zach Littell, Shane Baz, and Drew Rasmussen. That's six guys that most rotations in baseball would not mind having. So if they can stay healthy, I think they should be right back in the playoff hunt this year. And not that we expect the Rays to do a lot in free agency anyways, but I see why they didn't necessarily. The big thing, I'm not going to say it's the X factor, but a big thing for them is that their stadium was basically destroyed by the hurricane.
Yeah.
And so they will be playing this season and who knows how long in a spring training minor league field
Yeah.
down there in Tampa. So I have no idea what that effect will have on their team or visiting teams or what have you. I know that the Tropicana field was one of the weirdest ones to play in, to say the least, with the catwalks and everything. But yeah, we'll see. Well, the weather will be in play in Tampa for the first time, so we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, like you said, I think they realized with how many injuries they had last year, it's like they didn't have to spend a bunch or invest a bunch outside to still feel like they were getting a lot back in the team. Um, they made, in my opinion, some pretty solid free agency pickups. I mean, he's obviously recovering from his shoulder, but right now their penciled in starter for shortstop is Taylor Walls, and when Hassan Kim gets there, his worst year clears this guy by a mile. I mean, this dude, like, no offense if you're Taylor Walls and you're watching, but you kind of suck at baseball. Like, there's really not a lot here that's good. Um, and like you're saying, I mean, they've always been competitive, and with a bullpen, or not bullpen, a rotation like this, I mean, you're going to be in it. You're going to be in every game. I don't expect any of these guys to just go out and get lit up. Like, they may have a game or two, but, I think they'll be competitive. They don't excite me like some of the other teams on this in this division do, but it's a good team. I don't know. I don't know if I have like a ton to say. I'm looking at this roster and I'm like, it's good.
And that's the Rays thing. Like, they're
Yep.
never going to have a bunch of names that excite you or that you even necessarily recognize, but they'll all be pretty solid. Especially true in the bullpen. Like, they've got Pete Fairbanks, who's been
He's
around for a while
good,
now.
good.
He's really good. But then it's like a bunch of names that, like, I think maybe I've heard of this person, but like I don't know who this is. And they're gonna have one of the best bullpen ERAs in
Hmm.
baseball. They're they're just a pesky team. Like that. Like, as a Red Sox fan over the years, Yankees have always been my least favorite team, but the Rays are like right there because it's like, how is this team the team that's like the thorn in our side all the time? The Red Sox went on a streak before this past year where it was like they lost like 10 straight games in Tampa. Like, it just like they've just been a pain, and I expect that to continue Like last year was a little reprieve for the division, but I expect them to be right back in the thick of things this year, and I expect to be annoyed with them. And they'll be in the thick of things, and maybe they'll still trade Yandy Diaz because that's the kind of thing they do. Um,
Hmm.
and we'll see what happens. But yeah,
All right. So the Rays, let's go with some X factors for the Rays. Who or what are they going to depend on to get back in that postseason hunt?
Yeah, it feels kind of obvious, and so I'll kind of give it a half mention. But I mean, just the pitching health. I think first and foremost, if their rotation stays healthy, they're going to be a good team. That's just first and foremost. But I really do have a lot of respect for Ha-Seong Kim. I think he could be an actual game changer here. I mean, we're talking about a dude who could be Gold Glove on defense, and it was not more than 2 or 3 years ago. I mean, he had a really great offensive year. And if you can put both of those together in this lineup, I mean, that impact he could have with some of these guys around him could be really substantial. And again, just I think I would love to see him be the X factor on this team. I love Ha-Seong Kim. He's just such a good person. All his time with the Padres, I absolutely loved my little Korean King. I not only think he could be, I hope he is the X factor. I guess I should say.
Right on.
yeah, Ha-Seong Kim's great. He's good. He has such a high floor just because the defense is so good,
Mhm.
and maybe besides the Dodgers, the Rays are like the second team I think of when it comes to like, is a player going to be good on this team? Like the Rays know how to get the most out of their players, so I fully expect Ha-Seong Kim to be a massive contributor for them. My X factor, and you nailed it in your little first part, is health. Like this team was 2 games below 500 with a pitching staff that was ravaged by injuries. If they could stay even a little bit healthy, like I mean, that's going to do wonders for this team. And like you go 80 and 82 without Shane McClanahan, with Rasmussen missing a ton of time, with Taj Bradley and Shane Baz both missing a lot of time. Like you add those guys in and give them full seasons. I mean, who knows how far this Rays team can go?
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. I think we will see, it's hard to imagine worse injury luck or even as bad injury luck for a team to repeat a year over year. So, obviously knocking on all the wood possible for the Rays. But having said that, I think we'll see the Rays jump back into the heat of things this year, just as they normally are. And one team that, always could be in the heat of things, depending, based on who they have on their team, but could also, have a half year that looks very different than their first half of their year, depending on how that goes, is the Toronto Blue Jays. So, you take the offseason that the Red Sox had, where we heard a lot from them. They're in on a lot of people. They actually got a couple of them that we heard about. And take that offseason, mirror it for the Blue Jays, but they didn't get any of the people that they really
Mhm.
were in on. And so this was a key offseason for the Blue Jays. I'm sure you guys will get into that, but for the Blue Jays, what are they looking like this year? What are their odds for competing in this division? This really, really tough division.
Yeah, this offseason was tough for Blue Jays fans. After being teased by potentially getting Shohei last year,
Mm.
uh, obviously didn't come to fruition. This year, they were one of the teams really in on Juan Soto.
Uh-huh.
I think the fans were wise enough not to ever really see themselves as the favorite there. But then it was they were really in on Alex Bregman. They were really in on Pete Alonso. They were in on a ton of guys. Corbin Burns. They were really in on. In the end, they were able to convince Jeff Hoffman to sign there after he failed physicals with 2 teams. And then you were able to get Anthony Santander to sign there and gave him his bag. I think he was one of those free agents that was kind of like not every team was super into the idea of him because of some different numbers. And then you got Max Scherzer on kind of a, like, let's see if there's anything left in the tank type of deal. So after all that talk, it is a bummer they didn't get any of those guys. I think it's still like a decent offseason because compared to a lot of teams just did nothing.
True.
So I think it's okay. They traded for Andres Jimenez, which I don't love him as a player, but he is a great, just like we talked about with Hassan Kim, like he has such a high floor just because his defense is so good. Um, but the biggest thing that happened this offseason for the Blue Jays is that they failed to extend Vlad Guerrero Jr., who is their best player. He has been the face of their franchise since he came up, basically. Uh, he's on the last year of his contract. He's only 25, 26 years old. Like he's kind of in Juan
25.
Soto territory with age. He is going to be all eyes on him this year because if he repeats last year, he's going to make a ton of money in free agency. If he has a year where he's more down to earth, like he was in 23 and 22, thumbs up. Then maybe he's going to regret not accepting the, reported $350 million contract from the Blue Jays. We'll see. At the same time, if the Blue Jays have another season like last year where they're not really in it and the trade deadline comes around, he is going
Yep.
to be the crown jewel of the trade deadline. So all eyes will be on him. But I don't see any reason why this Blue Jays team as currently constructed could not be competitive. They have maybe an old pitching staff, but it's a lot of guys that, you wouldn't be shocked if they had good years. Kevin Gossman has been a really reliable pitcher. Chris Bassett, Jose Barrios, like I said, you had Max Scherzer, and then the young guy, Bowden Francis, that came up and dominated last year. The bullpen was one of the worst in baseball, if not the worst, last year. You add in Jeff Hoffman, who had a really, really good year last year. Like I mentioned, he apparently failed a couple physicals with teams, so I don't love that. But if he stays healthy, there's some names there that you could expect to bounce back and be good. And then the lineup, they all kind of just struggled last year, except for Vlad. So if that just, I know this is like kind of oversimplifying, maybe. If that just doesn't happen, they're a good team. Like there are names here where it's like you expect good things from them, and just like kind of none of them did it last year. And there were injuries at play, this and that. But like at the end of the day, this is like not a roster that you're really disappointed in.
Yeah, I definitely think I sit a little on the other side of it. They're not a bad roster by any means. I mean, if this is the worst team in a division, they're far and away one of the better worst teams. Um, with that being said, I do find this roster to be really uninspiring. I just it outside of a couple players, it just looks really average across the board. I think it's interesting. It seems like they were just every player's third favorite team. I mean, one player you forgot to mention that they lost out on, they were a finalist for Roki. Um,
Oh,
they
right.
were
Yep.
they were a top three finalist for Roki Sasaki, and they
Yeah.
sent who was it? They sent someone that made me laugh to like be the representative to like meet with him. It doesn't matter, but it's just like this team has tried to spend money everywhere. They tried to spend money even on uh, uh, why am I blanking on his name? We just talked about him from first baseman for the Mets, Pete
Pete
Alonso.
Alonso.
Yeah, and it's like they tried to throw money at him. For what reason? I don't know. And it's just the whole thing gives bad vibes of like there's a reason that Vlad didn't resign. I really believe that. I mean, he got offered a lot of money, as they offer everyone a lot of money, and he didn't take it. And I don't know if there's something that we just don't know or don't see as fans on the outside, but I don't know. There's just something about this roster and this team that makes me like, I don't see anything to love. Even if there's not a lot to dislike, I just don't know if I see anything to love. I personally have them as the bottom of this division for sure. And even if they have some positive regression from certain guys, I mean, Bo Bichette didn't have his usual type of production. He's also very like injured, but I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I have a lot to say about them. I'm not sure. I just don't. I don't. I'm not into it.
Yeah, I think it's easy to like just look at last year and be like, well, this is like almost the same team. You add a couple guys, um, and like they were a bad team. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They were bad last year. The question is, can they recapture how good they were in 22 and 23, where they made the playoffs, or are the vibes just toast? And like Vlad is a free agent, like we mentioned, after this year. Same with Bo Bichette. Same with Chris Bassett. I think Kevin Gossman might have 2 more years. Springer has a couple more years, but he's getting older. Like, I think it's fair to say, like, the vibes could just be toast, and Vlad could just be like, I just want to play out my contract and just get out of here. And if they're not bought into the goal of like, let's be a winning team, then they're not going to be a winning team. I think that there's truth to like you've got to buy in.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think we'll know pretty early on what this Blue Jays team is. If they come out hot, then we might be like, okay, they're given this like one last shot of this contention window that looked so promising 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Uh, I admire that. Like I know there was some takes once they before they got Santander and like they lost out on Shohei last year and then Soto and Sasaki and this and that. There were talk like did they just go full fire sale and start from scratch? Um, it's I think the front office guy and the manager are like on their last year of their contract maybe like there's something to that where it's like they're just trying to save their jobs at this point, but at the same time I think it's not a bad play when you have this core to give it one last shot, rather than just if it's bad, if it goes poorly, you can trade Vlad at the deadline. You'll still get a pretty good haul for him. You have other pieces you can move. You can start this rebuild. But I don't know. We'll just have to we'll just have to see if the Blue Jays decide that this is a year that they want to win, or if it's a year to raise up their values as players to, move on to their next job.
100%. Yeah, I definitely have this team as a team to keep an eye on around the trade deadline, depending on how their first half of their season goes. What all I'll say is it's a little bit of a different situation, like you mentioned, with those two front office members being, in a unique contract situation themselves. But I, just learn from the Angels. They had a chance to do what they needed to do. Trade deadline a couple years ago, they didn't do it, and they will pay the price for years to come for not doing that. And so, as we move on from the Blue Jays, and indeed from talking about this division as a whole, what are some X factors for the Blue Jays? What's going to help them make it so that they can capitalize on the last year of these guys' contracts before they have to make some decisions?
I have my X factors re-signing Vlad. If they don't re-sign Vlad, I don't know what the appeal of coming to this team is, building their roster. I mean, it would have to be fully homegrown. Um, he's already said he doesn't want to re-sign in the off or during the season, so he's going to wait for the off season. To me, that's pretty telling. But like, if you take Vladimir Guerrero out of this roster, this would be, in my opinion, one of the least desirable teams to go to as a player. Just as a competitor, as someone who wants to win, as someone who sees a future, I don't see a lot to love here. And I just think like Vladdy's been kind of that guy. And Bo Bichette had some great years as well. But it's Vladdy's team. You gotta give the team to him. And we've seen Juan Soto was just given 700 million. I'm not saying Vladimir Guerrero needs to get 700 million, but he needs to be giving. He needs more than 350. I mean, that's literally half. Are we saying Vlad's half of Juan Soto? I don't think so. Um, so when I see that, I think you have to commit to giving this team to him because if not, like you're saying, you have to trade it. You have to trade him. If you're not sure that he will sign, you just got to get rid of him because I don't think this team has a ton of future without him. Um, they would have to really start from scratch.
Yeah, I think if let's just say he plays out this year and goes to free agency, never gets traded or anything, I think it's very possible the Blue Jays give him the highest offer and he doesn't take it. Like, the deadline was a couple days ago to get it done before the season. It didn't happen. He now said he just wants to focus on the year. That could just be words. Like if the Blue Jays come with a high enough number, maybe he signs. But at this point, I mean, why wouldn't he go to free agency? He saw what happened with Juan Soto. He's the same age basically as Juan Soto. Maybe not quite the hitter, but he's young and he's an amazing hitter. Like he's gonna have his suitors. Um, so we'll see. The the word on the street, and it's been like this for a while. It's very strange. Is that he like has told people he wants to play for the Red Sox?
Mm-hmm.
Seems strange. I don't really know why. Like, hey, I'm cool with it, but I don't really know why a player would think that. Like in this era of Red Sox baseball, but I also know like it's been talked about like, oh, the Yankees will be really in on him. But he said he's kind of like Ken Griffey Jr. in this way. He said I will never play for the Yankees. So I like him for that. Yeah. I think this is the last year of Vlad on the Blue Jays. Whether it's a good one or not is up to the team. And Dallas's dog going a little crazy there. But my X factor just for this season is Bo Bichette because when the Blue Jays were really good, it was Bo Bichette and Vladdy were both hitting. And even Vladdy had some down years where Bo Bichette was like the better hitter overall. Maybe not as much power, but like he was the better hitter. And he kind of had a weird year last year where he's injured. He didn't play well when he was playing, and he like I don't remember the exact scenario, but there was some tension between him and the Blue Jays, and he was like I don't want to play here for the rest of my career, like weird stuff like that. I think he needs to have another good year for the team and for himself because even if the team's not good, he'll be a trade piece. Who couldn't use a shortstop that hits well, and he could make himself a decent little chunk of money. But if this team's going to go anywhere this year, they need Bichette to hit. They need a lot of guys to hit, but I think he's the one who just really took the furthest step back last year, and I expect a bit of a rebound.
Yeah, I mean, dude, his season last season was 70 points under his career average. Just one stat alone. 70-point drop is insane.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with all of that. So wrapping up the talk about this division, one more thing I wanted to get to. Who had your favorite offseason in this division, and who had your least favorite? Give a little brief blurb there. But we'll start with Matt. Give us your favorite offseason from this division.
Yeah, I don't love that it's them. I did personally really like the Yankees offseason. I think they just got a lot of players that I personally enjoy. And they didn't spend $1 billion on a single player who I think is awesome, but I publicly have been a little bit hesitant about. Um, we'll see if it pays off, but I think that they had a really good offseason. It was close with the Red Sox. I do really like their offseason as well. Um, Worst offseason for me, it's got to be the Blue Jays. I personally am not inspired by any of their moves. I think Santander is cool, but he probably is just a guy who's chasing a bag. I don't know if he's really going there because he's like trying to be something special. It kind of just seems like he wants the highest paying contract he could snag. Um, yeah, personally, I think that their offseason's been pretty at best.
Yeah, interesting. Like, there's only 5 teams here, but I picked 2 different teams for my winner and loser. I
Nice.
picked the Red Sox as my winner. the Yankees, like, I don't think they necessarily had a bad offseason, but like the Red Sox didn't lose anyone that's close to Juan Soto's caliber. The Yankees also lost Gleyber Torres. They also lost Clay Holmes. And they brought in good players, but I think the Red Sox, like, arguably added the two best players that were added in the division this year, Garrett Crochet and Alex Bregman. And they just, like I said, they didn't lose anyone of that caliber. So the Red Sox only improved where the Yankees had to first, the team had to get worse, and then they had to build back up to get better. And like I said with the breakdown, I don't know if this Yankees team is better than last year's Yankees team. I just don't think that. I think the Red Sox are definitely a far improved team from last year. And the worst has to be, or my least favorite has to be the Orioles, because you just have it like it's just so obvious what they need, and they just didn't do it. Um, Blue Jays, I credit them for trying. Obviously, I like would have preferred they got a Juan Soto, or they got a Roki Sasaki, or they got Pete Alonso even over Santander. But at least they were, going for these guys. Where the Orioles, they seemed like they were kind of in on Corbin Burns. It seemed like they were maybe in on Blake Snell, but then he signed super fast. So after that, like, they just didn't do anything. There was like other solid pitchers, in the second tier. There was Jack Flaherty, there was Nick Pivetta. Uh, it's been such a long offseason, but like there were guys out there that were better than Charlie Morton and that were better than Sagano, and they just didn't do it. And I don't know why. And if you have that lineup, you just got to invest in pitching, and they didn't. And so they have my least favorite.
Yeah, no question. No question. Well, good stuff there, guys. And so finally, we, of course, want to give your predictions for how this division will shake out. You can start, first to last. Who's got first place? Who's finishing last? And let's start with Drew.
Yeah, I'm going to just hedge my happiness here a little bit and say that the Yankees are going to get first place again. I just think their pitching staff is so good. If they stay healthy, they should be right in the thick of things. I think the Red Sox will get second place, and I think they'll make the playoffs. And here's where I got maybe a little bold. I don't know, compared to what I've seen. I think the Rays are going to be third, and I think they will be a playoff team as well. I just never want to count out the Rays. They had a uncharacteristic injury-heavy year last year, and I think that won't happen again. And they're just a good team. And then I think Baltimore's going to get fourth. And I haven't decided yet if they're going to be the third wild card. It's possible we get all the wild cards from one division because the American League is so weak. But Baltimore should be in the hunt. But I just, like I said, with their offseason, I just didn't like it. And I think their pitching is going to come back to bite them. And then last, I think, Matt kind of sold me on the vibes in Toronto. Like, they're already arguably the worst team in this division, even if it's like a good division top to bottom. But just if the vibes are bad, which they very easily could be, then they're just not going to play well. And so in this tough division, I have them getting last.
Yeah. So we have we've got two of the teams in the same spot. I'll start at the top. I do think no, let's start at the bottom. I think the Blue Jays are last. Absolutely, I think the Blue Jays are last. The vibes, to my opinion, to my view of it, the vibes seem rotten. I didn't even know about the weird Bo Bichette stuff where he was saying he didn't necessarily know if he wants to be on the team. If all of your like cornerstone pillar type of players are just like, yeah, we don't want to be here, then who's gonna try? Like it's granted, have a little self pride, perform for your own self, whatever. But it's like we've seen plenty of players just kind of mail it in once they get their contracts. I don't see this Blue Jays team going anywhere. That being said, I like that the Rays do seem to always, kind of put some surprising seasons together, but I don't think they're going to escape the impact of not playing at their home field. It could go one of two ways. I think that it's one of those things like it could inspire them. I mean, we saw, the Saints after Katrina go on a tear, and at the same time, playing in a new stadium, playing in a stadium where you're not used to the visuals, you're not used to what you're looking at. Everything's just going to be different. You know, you learn how to play a certain outfield, and then you go to a field that's a new outfield. Um, all that stuff can impact a team. I don't think that they're necessarily going to be better than any of the other three teams. So I have the Rays finishing fourth. Um, Third, I have the Yankees. I do think that there's at least initially a fall off. I think their future's more stable, in my opinion, with the investments they've made, and we'll see about the prospects. I do personally like their younger guys as well, but I have them coming in third. Second, I have the Red Sox. Like you said, I think they're going to be vastly improved. I'm really excited to see kind of how that shakes out, but I do think they're going to be good. If Trevor Story stays healthy, I would love to see him have an awesome year. Um, and then I'm totally banking this. If this doesn't happen, I would flip the Orioles down to third. I just don't think they're going to sit still and let the whole season go by without investing. Um, there's just too much time left when we're making these predictions where I'm like, and they could totally shock me and be that bad, but it's like I just can't imagine them sitting still for that long, knowing, like you said, it's so obvious what they need. It's so obvious what they need, and there's teams out there that realistically, before the season have started, are already pretty much out of contention. And it's just like, can they add some solid pitching around their rotation? Because I still think, like we talked about, they've got an elite bullpen. They've got an awesome lineup. Can they get one or two more starters to really round out this rotation? I think they can. They have the prospects. They have the money. I think they can do it. Um, and if they do that, I think that they come in first.
All right. So there you have it. Those are our predictions for the AL East. Appreciate the thoughts as always, guys. We'll also link Drew's writing again this week for this division. We'll link it down below here so you can check that out as some supplemental reading. And so looking ahead to next week for this segment, we'll talk about the NL Central. We'll make our way east. We'll hit the NL Central next. So that's what we got coming up for our division previews next week. Next up, we'll talk about the NFL honors and get to those awards and some discussion there. We'll take a quick break for us and then be right back with you to talk about that. All right, so a couple weeks before the Super Bowl, actually just the week before the Super Bowl, a couple weeks ago, the NFL honors took place. We had some award winners for regular season performance. We all know how that went down. There were a lot of interesting things to come out of this award show, if you want to call it that, this awards ceremony. So we wanted to definitely hit some of those very interesting things. First of all, is the NFL honors something you watch, or is it something you guys follow? I'm more of a follower of it. I don't know if I sit down to take a watch of it, but I'm interested to know how invested you guys were into watching it.
I can't lie. Usually, when that time comes around, it really depends on kind of who's up, like who's a finalist. I'll watch if there's players I love. I'll watch if there's people I'm connected to, whatever it is. So, I mean, this year I was pretty tuned in. Had a few people in my life who were up for the awards, but yeah. So it's year by year. Some years there's people where I'm like, I really don't care to watch.
Yeah,
it's a fairly long show.
Yeah, I don't watch it. I'll follow Twitter to see when the awards are announced, because I do like to know, but I don't need all the showmanship and I don't need the speeches or anything. Like, I mean, it's cool. Like, I think it's a cool idea if you're a really big football fan. That's something you definitely should watch. But I just I just need the information. I don't need all the fanfare.
Yeah, until the day that someone delivers, an incredible speech, or something like that. I'm the same way. All these athletes, they go through so much media training that it's just they don't know how to do it anymore after a certain point. Once you get to the level where you're winning these kind of awards, you've gone through this kind of stuff so much that you don't forget how to be a person in a moment like that. But all right, so let's talk about MVP. that was the big deal. Well, I mean, it's the biggest award, but it was a big deal this year because, for one thing, this was the first year ballots were made public. We won't talk too much about that, but that was important because it was also the closest MVP race in recent years, maybe almost ever. We had Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. Those were the two guys that the writers seemed to be split amongst themselves on. Josh Allen got 27 first place votes. Lamar Jackson got 21 first place votes. I believe the difference in the points total for them was only about 20, 30 points, something like that. And so however those points add up, I'm not too sure, but that was how close it was. Basically, it could have been either one of these guys, depending on how people voted. And Josh Allen was the winner. So in a race as close as that, 1 or 2 votes makes a difference. So I wanted to know, would the votes in this room have made a difference? Who would you guys have voted for? Who would have gotten your first place vote for MVP?
Drew, you want to take a swing?
Yeah, so I heard like it was a close race, and then the funny thing was like Lamar Jackson was first team All Pro over Josh Allen. It's like, oh, isn't it the same voting body and all that? So it is interesting. So I dug in, and I definitely would have voted not for Josh Allen. He was 14th in the league in passing yards, 24th in completion percentage, 7th in touchdowns, and I don't know the difference because I was looking on ESPN for the stats. ESPN has their own quarterback rating thing, and he was tied for first with Lamar Jackson. But they also have passer rating on there, and he was 8th, where Lamar was first. So I don't really know how that's calculated or what. The guy that I thought had a better, based on what I was looking at numbers wise, who I thought had a better argument than Josh Allen was Joe Burrow. He was first in yards. He was 4th in completion percentage. He was first in touchdown passes. So he won comeback player of the year. Good for him. I think in the end, I would have voted for Lamar Jackson because his team made the playoffs, and his rushing totals are obviously better than Joe Burrow's, so that plays a factor. But yeah, I think it's interesting that Josh Allen won. I'm not really sure like what what the basis for that was. I mean, he had a good year, no doubt, but like I don't know how you can look at all this and say he definitely had a better year than Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, I think if the question is being posed, between those two, who was more deserving of the MVP, I do think it's Lamar Jackson. Just on paper, he had a clearly better year. And that's no disrespect to Josh Allen. I think, personally speaking, I do think Josh Allen had not as great of a offensive roster. I think that Lamar Jackson's, put him with that offensive line and Derrick Henry. It takes a lot of pressure off a quarterback. Um, but all that being said, I mean, Lamar Jackson was awesome, just completely electric. This is the best season we've seen from Lamar as a passer. I think Lamar Jackson was he would have been my pick for MVP if it was between those two guys. Um, I personally, though, am anti-quarterback. I would have loved to see Saquon get more love in the MVP voting. The season he had, like, we're talking about really good seasons from quarterbacks and there being the MVP, and we're talking about one of the best seasons we've ever seen from a running back. And yeah, he gets Offensive Player of the Year, but everyone kind of knows that's essentially just like the offensive MVP. It's the non-quarterback award. Um, I would have loved to see Saquon get some more love in that conversation. Joe Burrow was also, I mean, I think he kind of got put into the box of comeback player just because of the injury. He was insane this year, and I'm not the biggest Joe Burrow like guy. I think he's good. I don't think he's like this like all-time quarterback, but man, you look at the numbers and what his defense was doing to him. Like that dude was being let down by his defense weekly. He was just going to shootouts against any team. So
Yeah, 100%. So, take a look. Maybe these votes, depending on where you guys would have put Josh Allen, maybe they would have made a difference in who ended up winning that award. Yeah, I was going to ask about because I think the argument for Josh Allen among a lot of people was supporting cast related. So, how do you guys feel about that as an argument for somebody being the MVP, taking their supporting cast into consideration and saying that Lamar was less valuable because he has better players with him?
I think the supporting cast thing, it's tough because it should be taken into consideration. Because if you're just saying like the most valuable player, who brings the most value to their team, right? And I think that's why that gets brought into the conversation. And to that argument's detriment, I think that's why a quarterback wins it every year. Um, but at the end of the day, I mean, you can't blame players for the players that are around them. It's not Jalen Hurts' fault that his offense is stacked, right? Like he didn't choose those players. And not saying that he's mad about it because he wants MVPs. It's just like the players don't get to really choose most likely who's on that roster with them. And so, with that being said, I don't think that it should really be held for or against a player who their supporting cast is. I think you still got to come out and perform. I don't know.
I think I could see the supporting cast thing if it was like night and day, very, very obvious. That's one thing. I don't know if like the Bills are not like some poverty franchise. Like they have good players.
Mhm.
I think if the numbers were like super super close, that might be a tiebreaker for me. It's like okay, well, who did more with less? But I think like there's just really no argument for Josh Allen being a better quarterback than Lamar Jackson this year, uh, regardless of who played with who. Um, Lamar, like you said, he had his best passing season. Like you add Derrick Henry to this team, that's great. He still had 4,000 passing yards. He still threw 41 touchdown passes.
Yep.
That's a lot. Josh Allen only threw for 28, which that's not everything, but like I would take that more into account um, if it was a closer race statistically. But I just like when I dug into the surface level stats, I'm like, I don't see any where Josh Allen did better than Lamar Jackson this year.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting conversation because when you look at the last, I'm looking at the last 10 MVP winners right here. Every single one of them has pretty much a dominant team or one of the best teams. And sure, that's probably in great part because of the quarterbacks, leading their teams to wins. But at the same time, like all these guys have awesome teams. And so it begs the question, like, do people with better teams actually get preference on it? Because look at Joe Burrow. I mean, yeah, he's got Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase is awesome. He had T. Higgins for most of the year. T. Higgins is awesome. Outside of that, I mean, his offensive line was just letting people run it. They did not care. And the run game was flashy, but it was not what it was in the past with Mixon. And like there's quarterbacks that did almost as much with far, far, far less. I mean, he won offensive rookie of the year, I believe, but you look at what what Jaden Daniels did this year. Are we saying that you put Lamar or we put Josh Allen on that team, on the Commanders, and they're going to do what they did with Jaden Daniels this year? I don't know. I mean, it's a theoretical, but at the same time, the team quality is just so different for some people where that's why I think what Drew's kind of going at is like when there's that much of like a like separation, that much of a gap between quality of team, I do think at that point you can start to talk about if it matters because there's people having awesome seasons on really tough teams.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
100%.
think I don't envy. I just want to say like any NFL awards voters because more than any other sport, I think I've brought this up before. It just like the positions are so different. Like
Yeah.
in basketball, in baseball, in hockey, you can kind of like
Who
there's like
scores?
stats that just apply to all players. But passing stats only apply to quarterbacks. Blocking stats only apply to linemen. Like receiving stats only apply to pass catchers. So like it's just an impossible task, and it's become much to Matt's chagrin the quarterback of the year award. Um, so I don't know I don't know how to fix that. I don't envy these guys, but yeah, it, it's hard.
Yeah, this year's another year where you look at a player like Saquon and you think if that's not good enough, for to challenge even a couple quarterbacks, when will it be good enough? Who will have the good enough season? If not him, then who can possibly challenge these quarterbacks for an award like this? And for Lamar Jackson, I will say too, you know, Aaron Rodgers, he has that. I believe he still has the record for the highest passer rating in a season, right? Something like 100, something ridiculous, like 104, 105 or something. And Lamar Jackson came really close to beating that this year. And he was really, really close. And for that to happen for him, and for him not to win MVP is pretty nutty. Especially when when the race was between two quarterbacks, two passers. And so, yeah, that for me, that was pretty crazy. But moving on from MVP, onto there were a couple of players who are dear to this podcast that got some love in these awards on the defensive side. So Pat Surtain, the second, PS2, he won the Defensive Player of the Year from the Broncos. So Drew, you want to throw your guy a little love?
Yeah, I mean, this is awesome. He I think deserved it because in a year where there's not the dominant sack getter or like the dominant pass rusher or whatever, which there were some good ones, but like the statistically it wasn't like the same as certain years. I like giving some love to the cornerback who you don't always get to see their statistical impact on a game because especially if you're a lockdown corner and you don't get targeted that much. Um, but I think watching a lot of Broncos this year, like it's very clear Pat Surtain is an amazing cornerback. He shuts down his guy. Uh, I don't like. I'm not like super in tune to all these like stats they have, but he gave up a 43.9 quarterback rating this year, which is just slightly above if the quarterback had just thrown the ball at the ground every play. Um, So, I mean, that's definitely something. He only allowed one touchdown all year. He had 4 picks. He was number one in yards per attempt for any corner. So, I mean, there's probably better statistical arguments, but I can just say from watching him, he's just amazing, an amazing player. And, he is on track to be one of the great Broncos defenders of all time.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a great fun to watch as someone who grew up watching. I didn't grow up watching Richard Sherman, but I was in high school when Richard Sherman was playing, and so I have a deep, deep love for cornerbacks, and so I love when they play well, love when they can shut them down, and so he's fun to watch. And then on the Rams, Jared Verse won Defensive Rookie of the Year. I remember texting Matt during one of the Seahawks and Rams games this year because I had not really paid much attention to the Rams by that point in the year. Like a lot of people had, of course, written them off in the beginning, so I hadn't really paid attention much to who was balling out on that team while they were a little bit down and out. And I remember texting Matt and saying, "Please tell me that Jared Verse is not a rookie. Like, please tell me that this is a contract year and they're not going to be able to afford him, or he's on a 1 year deal and he might not come back. Please tell me he's not a rookie," and he sure is, and he sure did win the Defensive Rookie of the Year. So let's throw some love his way, Matt. Let's have it for Jared Verse.
Yeah, dude. I even as a Rams fan, I was excited for Jared Verse. I did not think that he was going to come in and immediately have the impact he did. Um, I will own up to it. Anyone who knows me knows I was hoping that the Rams would take Cooper DeJean in the first round. Might have seemed like a stretch for some, but I think he kind of backed it up this year too. But Jared Verse, I mean, he has all the measurables, and I saw someone putting it side by side with Myles Garrett when he came out. When you talk about size, strength, speed, agility, every combine, activity, every single workout, the dude was basically a carbon copy of Myles Garrett. And I think he showed. I mean, the dude had so many pressures this year. I think he either led the league or was close to leading the league by the end in just total pressures on the quarterback. Obviously, the sack numbers weren't extravagant by any means, but overall, I mean, just the impact he had play in, play out, the absolute just like dog he has, the effort he was giving. I don't know how many times I watched Saquon break a 60-yard run against the Rams, and actually the closest guy to chasing him down was always Jared Verse. And, there's one of the plays they tracked Jared Verse going, I think it was 21 and a half miles per hour chasing Saquon. Do you know how scary that is, dude? Like at
Yeah.
his size, the fact that he has straight line speed enough to reach 21 miles an hour faster than guys like Tyreek this year. Tyreek didn't reach 21 this year. You're talking about some pretty substantial speed, and watching him kind of put it together during a certain stretch of the season, it was really exciting. I want to give a shout out too to Brandon Fisk, his teammate from Florida State. I mean, they picked them 1, 2, first round, second round, and we're gonna have these guys for a while, and those two are monsters together. I think Jared Verse absolutely would appreciate Fisk getting some love as well. So shout out to the Rams, man. Kind of nailed this.
My head hurts. My head hurts. And so does my
Was
heart,
he
to be
the
honest with you.
first? Was he the first defensive player off the board in the draft? I remember it was like it took forever for any defensive players to
I'll look
go
it up
this
really
past
quick
year.
because he was pretty high considering like who else was going. But I'll check that really quick.
I think like the first 15 picks or something were all offensive.
Yeah, because we
Yeah,
took him at 19, I believe.
Okay, he's up there.
Yeah,
yeah, certainly up
I
there.
got you. Give me 1 second, I'll confirm.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where, we're finally rid of Aaron Donald. I don't have to worry about Aaron Donald anymore. And sometimes you can create one Aaron Donald from two players. And with Brandon Fisk and Jared Verse, it's a whole new headache for NFC West teams. And that's one of my teams. And so, well, my team is one of those teams, and so a brand new headache has arisen when we thought we were free.
Yeah, man. I mean, that Rams front seven, I should say front four, really. Their linebackers are pretty, yeah. But that defensive line we put together, those pass rushers are nuts. And let me point out, though, as far as defensive players goes, the first defensive player taken was 15, Leatu Latu. I just felt like I stroked out reading that name. The guy from UCLA, edge rusher for the Colts,
Right.
uh, he was the first defensive player taken at 15. Byron Murphy, self-proclaimed second coming of Aaron Donald for the Seahawks. He was at 16. Dallas Turner, 17. Jared Verse, 19. So fourth defensive player, but I mean, he was the third edge. Like, I think he just got slept on. I don't know what it was, but
It
yeah,
happens.
I mean,
I
it
will
happens,
say
man.
for the Seahawks, Byron Murphy did do his job this year. His job. He's not necessarily getting after the quarterback guy. He was high. He was brought in to stop the run, and their run defense was much improved from last year this year. So he did his job. It's just that Jared Verse is one of the most explosive rookies on the board
Let me see that
as it comes
second
out this
coming
year.
of Aaron Donald. Uh, point 0.5 sacks. So point
Yeah, we
0.5
love.
sack.
Yeah, half sack. Yeah, the Seahawks have to figure it out. They have to figure out ways to get him in one-on-ones for sure when it comes to pass rush opportunities. But we'll talk more about the Seahawks and all their problems a little later on when we can do an episode that's like maybe just about our teams as the season gets closer, and we can just go off. But for now, any lingering thoughts about NFL honors? What do you guys think about some of these other awards? If you have thoughts.
Um, I want to say a big shout out to my guy Sam. Finally getting the notoriety, finally hitting some success in the league. Sam Darnold, super proud of him. Most improved player of the year. We'll see where he goes this year. I hope it's not the Raiders, but we will see. Um, I don't got much else to say about the rest of these. I mean, they all are kind of what you'd expect. But I just want to give a shout out to Sam.
Yeah, I have no qualms with any of these awards, but I want to talk about Offensive Rookie of the Year for a second because Jaden Daniels won,
Sure.
as he should have. Um, But I kind of want to like shout out Bo Nix because he got third, because Brock Bowers got second. Um, and I was hearing like, especially when Jaden Daniels was doing it for the Commanders in the playoffs and everything, like I was hearing takes like, is this the best rookie quarterback ever? Like, and he had a great year, and I don't want to take anything away from that. But Bo Nix had like a similarly good year, and I feel like that's kind of being underrated, even by a Broncos fan like me. Um, like if you went back a year ago and asked like who has like a worse outlook right now, the Denver Broncos or the Washington Commanders, I feel like most people would have said the Broncos, mostly because of the Russell Wilson situation, the cap hit that was going to be, and everything. But like, and then like Jaden Daniels was the second pick in the draft, and many people thought he was going to be good. Bo Nix was the 12th pick. He was the sixth quarterback taken, and a lot of people thought that was crazy that the Broncos did that. You take those situations in, uh, they both lead their team to the playoffs. Bo Nix has more passing yards and more passing touchdowns than Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels was better at like pretty much everything else, but like he was supposed to be. And I think Bo Nix wasn't necessarily supposed to be this good. I think he should have gotten second place because I think having a really really good tight end year is awesome, good for Brock Bowers. But like maybe this is going to get me canceled by Matt. I think that having leading the Denver Broncos to the playoffs at quarterback is a little more impressive. And yeah, their defense did a lot. We already talked about Pat Surtain. But yeah, I just want to like go Bo Nix. Like I'm like more hyped on him now than I was even when the season ended, just based on looking up some of these numbers.
Yeah, no, I 100% shout out to Bo Nix. I think he proved a lot of people wrong, and even people who were like pro Bo Nix, I think were still proven wrong. Like he outperformed even the optimistic outlooks for him. Because a lot of people said, he's good, but a lot of words where he's the most pro ready, he's all these things, but he was old and his upside wasn't there, and all the other things that came along with being pro ready. He had 1 billion college starts under his name, and the dude balled. I mean, he came in. Sean Payton knew exactly what he wanted to do with him, and I think we saw the limitations of the team a little bit this year, but I don't think that was necessarily Bo Nix's fault. And I think a lot of that was due to the lack of more explosive playmakers. We saw Mims come on at the end of the season and kind of start to take that role, but they didn't have a lot of that at first. Run game wasn't there for him, but Bo Nix was also one of the best running quarterbacks this year. Um, I think that's something that not a lot of people talked about in his game was the fact that he's an athlete. My man can get out of the pocket and make a run for it, and he did against NFL defenses and was really good at it. I'm not going to get into the does he deserve second place, first place, third place. All three were incredible rookies this year. I mean, Brock Bowers did set the rookie receiving season record, which for a tight end is awesome. And considering who was throwing him the ball is also impressive. Um, their team leader for passing yards was Gardner Minshew with 2,000. And so it's just, not it's almost like what a Josh Gordon did back with the Browns when he had like four quarterbacks throwing him 1,600 yards. Like Brock Bowers himself had an awesome year, but it was just an awesome year for rookies. I mean, what a class of rookies. And so it does make it tough when there's not one clear cut guy. Um, but all that to say, yeah, dude, shout out Bo Nix. He had an awesome year.
Yeah, I'll say this about Bo Nix. I'm glad the Seahawks played in week one because if they hadn't, I believe they would have lost that game. And that would have made me upset. I would have been mad at that. But yeah, great. He's going to be definitely very interesting to watch next year to see, where he goes from this rookie takeoff. So great. That's NFL honors. It was great to see some of these guys win. A lot of players who haven't necessarily been up on that stage a lot, winning awards, getting a chance to shine. So that's always great. So now we're going to close out the show with the first edition of what will be a hopefully weekly recurring segment on this show. It is the namesake of the show, derived from that. Dingers and Stingers is the segment name here. So, brief explainer. Each of you is going to give a dinger for the week, which is something good that you liked to hear about from the world of sports. Could be a player performed well, or a headline caught your attention, or something's happening in the sport that you like. And then you'll also give a stinger. So that's something that you disliked, same sort of area. So, something that you disliked from the world of sports this week could be anything. So I'd like to end with the good. So let's start with the stingers. So I want your guys' stingers. Drew, give me your stinger, and then Matt, give me your stinger.
Yeah, my stinger of the week, and we kind of talked about it a little bit. It's the Rafael Devers situation is the most glaring example right now, but it's these guys who, Devers has not been a good defensive third baseman. He is digging his feet in, saying, I will not move to DH. I will not move to first base, wherever. Uh, in the end, I don't think he has a say in that. I get, taking pride in your position and this and that, but I, he already got his bag. He doesn't have to worry about money, future contracts and all that. Do what's best for the team. And I don't know if moving him off third is necessarily going to be the best move for the team right now as it stands, but I just don't like the indignation there of being so sure of it. Another example is Marcus Stroman uh, with the Yankees saying, he's kind of the sixth starter right now, and they're only going to go with five. So, he was like, I'm not going to go to the bullpen. I am a starting pitcher. And it's like, yeah, but if the team needs you to be in the bullpen, you got to be in the bullpen. And his is a little different. He does have money at stake with that. Apparently, Gleyber Torres did this last year when the Yankees traded for Jazz Chisholm. I just don't like it. If you are clearly not the best option, then do what's best for the team. You know, and that's my little old man rant of the day, and that's my stinger of the week is guys who just can't accept their fate and dig their heels in.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, dude, I totally agree with that. I think it's so frustrating. I think it's so frustrating. Like, at some point, just lose the ego. There's a difference between like confidence and cockiness. At some point, you just gotta accept the reality. Um, I'll go around to my stinger, dude. It's the fact that the Rams are popping up in Aaron Rodgers rumors. That terrifies me to my core, because the inherent possibility of getting Aaron Rodgers means they would be losing their current quarterback, which is Matthew Stafford, who I adore with everything I have. If the Rams trade Matthew Stafford and the response to that is to sign Aaron Rodgers, there's potential that for the first time in my life, I would be on hiatus from the Rams. Um, I would be on a temporary free agency of fanship. I just don't think I can do it. I mean, he may be my least favorite player in the entire league, and I don't want him and Devontae Adams coming to the Rams thinking it's going to be all about them. I mean, Sean McVay has spent his entire tenure in the Rams talking about we not me. That's always been his thing, is we not me. And I think the players that the Rams have had have all been about that. I mean, you look at guys like Cooper Kupp, you look at guys like Aaron Donald, guys who are willing to mentor other players, Andrew Whitworth, Robert Woods. These are all dudes who changed the culture of the Rams, and they did it through we not me. And it's like, if we get Aaron Rodgers, he might be the most selfish player I've seen since I've been born. Like, and granted, he was really good in his prime, but he's 41 years old. Like, oh, it would kill me. That would kill me. That would kill me. It
It
would
it
sting.
it's shocking to me that there's anyone, and obviously this hasn't happened yet. So maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's all nothing. But it's shocking to me that there's any teams out there that are like, yeah, Aaron Rodgers is the guy I want leading my team after what's happened the last few years, let alone a team like the Rams, who have been very successful recently and have been very
Mhm.
successful with Matt Stafford at the helm. Uh, I just don't get it.
And,
If it's a
and
money
granted,
saving move,
it would absolutely be because Aaron Rodgers is not predicted to get more than the veteran minimum, so he'd be getting less than 2 million a year. And if he was on a 1 year deal, the Rams don't like anyone in this current draft. There's a lot of logistical stuff that like if you take it in a vacuum makes sense, but you can't take this one in a vacuum because you're talking about a guy who in a singular year caused what was already a disastrous locker room to become more so. And the damage he could do to a locker room and a organization who's been so solid and stable for the past few years, like the damage he could do would just be like more devastating than the benefits of trading Stafford and saving the money. And you can always make the money work. I mean, Joe Burrow talked about it. You can extend, restructure, convert to signing bonus. You can make it work. Just pay Stafford, let him retire Ram, keep the peace. We can still, trade and get our quarterback of the future in next year's draft. I'm all for the timeline and the window that they're putting forward, but Aaron Rodgers is not the bridge. I'd rather roll Jimmy G out. Like straight up, I'd rather roll Jimmy G out and let him be our quarterback for a year. I don't think we'd be that great. I don't think we'd be that bad. I think we'd be just an average NFL team. But not Aaron Rodgers, man. Aaron Rodgers. It would kill me. It would just absolutely kill me.
Yeah, and by the way, I'll close that out by saying the Rams, it's not necessarily throw a year away time. You have Jared Verse winning
Yeah.
Defensive Rookie of the Year. You have these guys, this defense that turned around quicker than people thought it would. It's not throwaway year time for the
And
Rams.
people
It's not.
forget we were 14 yards away from actually beating the Eagles in
Right.
the snow, like 14 yards, and it was on a
Right.
blown block. Jalen Carter got in Stafford's face and he missed the throw. We took the Eagles to the very brink, which no other team can say they did. And if we beat the Eagles, you're not convincing me we lose to the Commanders. And if we beat the Eagles, you're not convincing me we lose to the Chiefs. Like, I really do believe it's that close. Like, we could have been 14 yards from another Super Bowl, and Aaron Rodgers would be nowhere near our rumors. Nowhere near.
Yep. So, we'll see how it plays out. If the God I believe in exists, he'll be a Ram and Stafford will be long gone. But we'll see. So we'll move on to dingers now. One with the posy vibes. I will not spoil it, but both of your dingers are pretty similar. So, we can hit it. We'll start with Matt this time, and then we'll go to Drew's dinger to end the show.
Yeah. I mean, in spite of an otherwise pretty underwhelming offseason, my Padres did re-sign Don Orsillo, who I think is just one of the best commentators in the sport, maybe in sports, just period. Um, Genuinely has been one of my favorite parts of being a Padre fan is listening to him call the games. I think he's super fun. He's super in tune with the players. Everybody loves him, and I think you kind of see that when he talks to the players and when he talks to like other media people. Like he's just a beloved commentator. Very excited we locked him up. I was going to be bummed if we had this kind of sad, lackluster offseason and we lost Don. So big shouts to the Padres.
yeah, I mean, he was the Red Sox guy for years and years. He was kind of the voice of my childhood. So yeah, no arguments for me. He's one of the best. Still, like you could ask a lot of Red Sox fans. Okay, you can only take back one of these. Losing Don Orsillo or losing Mookie Betts, they might have to think about it for a second.
Hmm.
Yeah, he's great. And I saw it was like he's extended so that it's probably going to be his job for the rest of his career. Like I didn't see the actual years, but it was like that was the vibe. Um, so that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
My dinger of the week is also broadcast related. Our guy Joe Buck is he stepped away from baseball for the last few years since he moved over to ESPN. It's always bothered me that he doesn't do the ESPN baseball broadcasts when he
Stinks.
could. He could. I mean, he's he's only doing football now, so like he's available. Uh, he made it clear he doesn't really want to do that, but he is calling opening day. Yankees Brewers is going to be on ESPN, and he's going to be on the call for that. I look forward to watching. I love opening day because, most days I won't just watch like all the games, but on opening day I try to tune in to as much as I can. Uh, and to hear Joe Buck on a baseball call again, I know he's not everyone's favorite. Me and Dallas got to meet him one time. He has a special place in our heart. And it just, his voice is, that in my head, it's like his voice equals big game. Um, and so I'll always associate that. And I'm excited to see him do it again. Hopefully it leads to more in the future. I'd love him to be the Sunday night baseball guy. I don't know if that's ever going to happen, but uh, yeah, I'm excited about that.
Now, I've always loved Joe Buck. I've never understood the hate he got. Like, especially when you look, I mean, there's a lot of bad commentators out there. And even if he's not your favorite, he's not the worst. Like, I think even the people that don't like him can admit there's a lot worse out there. Joe
Oh yeah.
Buck is a good commentator, any sport.
Yeah, 100%. We love Joe Buck here. He has a ton of memorable calls for me, both from mostly from football, I guess, for me. And of course, the Angels did once upon a time win a World Series, and he was, there for some of that, playoffs. But and so, look. I am very much looking forward to hearing him on a baseball game again as well. I saw who his partners were going to be, but I forget who they are now. It's just completely gone out of my head. He chose a Yankee guy and a Brewers guy. They're going to be with him. And so somebody who has associated with either team is going to be in there with him. So that's the way he likes to do it. I talked to him actually when we met him. I talked to him about his time in a 3-man booth and when he was in a booth with Chris Collinsworth and Troy Aikman back in those days. And, he had some thoughts. I don't really remember all of what he said, but ultimately I think he preferred the 2-man booth, but it'll be interesting to see him in a 3-man one again. And look, I'm loving the amount of fun he's having on Monday Night Football. Him and Troy, like they sound like they do shots beforehand and then just go hammer, during the broadcast. It's great. I think it's the best Monday Night Football's been since Mike Tirico and John Gruden. And so I have really enjoyed them coming on there. But yes, it has been a great loss to not have him on big baseball games anymore. And so it'll be great to hear him on opening day, at least this year, for sure. Yeah, so that'll do it for another great episode of Dingers and Stingers. It was a great time. I love chatting sports with you guys. Thanks so much for listening and watching wherever you are listening and watching from. We appreciate the love. As always, share us around if you can. Spread the love. We appreciate it. And as we get this thing up and running. But looking forward to next week. Like I said, we'll be on to the NL Central as far as our division previews. That will continue. And then we'll keep our ear to the ground on NFL stuff. The combine is imminent. Things like that. So, rumors are going to start to fly. There was salary cap news today we didn't even get to today. So maybe when that looks a little more finalized, we'll talk about that as well. But we'll keep our ear to the ground. So from all of us to you, have a great week, and we'll see you again next week for another wonderful episode of Dingers and Stingers. Bye-bye.
Bye.